Good evening to all you brave souls out there, ready to hear another chilling tale from the realm of the unknown. Tonight, we dive into a story about a young woman in Salem, Oregon, who comes face to face with something far beyond our everyday reality. A presence has latched onto her, something that seems to recognize itself in her and refuses to leave until it takes what it wants. Dim the lights because it's time for another haunting account in our collection of paranormal encounters. Hello to everyone reading this. My name is Claudia, and this is my first time sharing anything like this in writing. I'm from Salem, Oregon, and I've been an avid listener of supernatural podcasts since 2020. It started as a fun hobby with my sister, something we tune into on quiet nights for that extra thrill. Now, I listen to these stories whenever I get the chance, whether I'm doing chores or just relaxing. What happened to me took place when I was 21. I'm now 27, married and expecting my first baby. But back then, I worked full-time as a bartender at a small local pub in downtown Salem, not too far from the Willamette River. It was the kind of place locals frequented, more like an old-fashioned tavern than a modern bar. I liked my job, I enjoyed chatting with regulars, I made decent tips, and it was conveniently close to home. One October evening, I left work later than usual, close to midnight. I didn't worry about walking home in the dark, because my apartment building was literally around the corner, barely a block away. That night, as I was wiping down tables and flipping the chairs up, I suddenly heard the distinct sound of a marble dropping and bouncing on the old wooden floor toward the back of the pub. I paused, listening, but since I had a lot to finish, I brushed it off. By the time I locked up, it was already after 1 a.m. Once I got home, everything felt normal. I took a shower, changed into my pajamas, and lay down to sleep. My dog, a friendly, protective pit bull named Rocky, always slept in my room with me. However, not long after I drifted off, I was jolted awake by his barking. It was a strange, urgent bark, unlike the one he used when he wanted to go out. Half asleep, I sat up to see Rocky standing at the bedroom door, growling softly with his tail tucked low. It was clear he was terrified. I got up, feeling a sense of unease. I followed Rocky into the hallway, flipping on the light. He'd bark, then look back at me, as if he wanted to make sure I was still there. Step by step, we moved toward the living room. At first, I didn't notice anything odd, just the usual shadows cast by the streetlights outside. But then, near the kitchen doorway, I saw it. A tall, dark figure gliding silently across the floor, vanishing the moment I tried to focus on it. My heart pounded. Instinct kicked in, and I followed it, though Rocky wouldn't come with me once we reached the living room. He stayed by the couch, watching me as I inched closer to the kitchen. When I reached the doorway, I was met by a horrifying sight. A woman with long black hair, wearing what looked like a thin, white nightgown that trailed on the floor. But the most disturbing detail was her face. She had no lower jaw, just a gaping space where it should have been. I froze. I couldn't scream. It felt like my body forgot how to move. She stood there, motionless, staring at me with lifeless eyes. My entire body felt numb until she slowly raised an arm toward me, as though beckoning me closer. In that moment, my fear took control. I stumbled backward and started yelling for my mother and sister, who both lived with me. They rushed out of their rooms, only to find me trembling and sobbing in the hallway. I could hardly form words to explain what I'd just witnessed. It took several minutes for me to calm down enough to speak. When I finally managed to describe the horrifying scene, they looked skeptical. Our apartment had never been haunted before, and they chalked it up to a nightmare or an overactive imagination. My mum just suggested I sleep with the light on, and my sister said she'd leave her door open in case I needed her. The next day, I was exhausted in class, replaying the night's events in my head. Part of me wondered if I had dozed off and dreamt the whole thing, except Rocky's reaction had been so real. After school, I headed to the pub for my usual shift. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I heard that same mysterious marble sound again, this time echoing near the back storage room. Determined to solve the mystery, I searched every corner for something rolling on the floor, but found nothing. As the nights went on, Rocky continued his uneasy barking whenever we tried to sleep. He'd stare into the hallway, growl, and refuse to settle. I started shutting my bedroom door, hoping it would at least block out whatever was scaring him, if it was even there. But deep down, I knew I was just avoiding a confrontation with something that might be far beyond my understanding. With Halloween on the horizon, the pub was decorated for the season. Plastic bats, fake cobwebs, the works. I felt an unusual dread, worried that the spooky atmosphere might somehow encourage more of these strange occurrences. One night, my sister came by to keep me company at work because I was too jumpy to be there alone. As we sat chatting in a lull between customers, she froze mid-sentence and asked, "Did you hear that?" It was the exact same marble-dropping sound that had haunted me for days. For the first time, I felt a small relief that someone else had finally witnessed at least part of what I was experiencing. We decided to investigate together, moving cautiously toward the back of the pub. No sooner had we started looking than commotion broke out in the street outside, people shouting and what sounded like a police siren in the distance. We rushed out and saw the neighborhood on high alert. Apparently, a nearby shop had just been robbed. The manager of the shop next door told us to stay inside and lock up. I immediately called my boss to explain the situation, and he showed up soon after, worried about our safety. My sister prompted me to share my weird marble sound story with my boss, so I reluctantly told him everything, feeling a bit embarrassed about it. He listened thoughtfully and then insisted that the pub couldn't be haunted because he often played low-volume Christian music from a hidden speaker. I had no idea he did that, but indeed, he showed me the little device behind the bar. It was turned on, playing music so quietly that you'd only notice it if the place was dead silent. He suggested maybe the marble noise was a sort of divine sign warning me about the robbery. I remained unconvinced. Something in my gut told me there was more to it, something far darker. Halloween came and went without any new terrifying incidents. I almost believed the worst was behind me. Until November 3rd, I arrived at work that afternoon, planning to do my usual cleaning before the evening crowd. Let me pause for a moment to describe the layout. Across from the bar itself was a tall wooden shelf where my boss kept a small altar. It had a framed picture of St. Anthony, a statue of St. Jude, fresh flowers, and a couple of votive candles. I was cleaning the top of the fridge, which stands near the shelf, when I noticed a flash of movement in my peripheral vision, like the tail of a small black dog darting behind a table. Excited, I turned to look because stray pups sometimes wandered in, and I'd give them scraps of food, but this time, there was nothing there. Besides, the stray I knew had a white-tipped tail, not a completely black one. Confused, I went back to my task. Only a few seconds later, I saw the same black tail again, this time near the bar. I turned fully around, and in that split second, the entire altar flew off the shelf. It didn't simply fall. It looked like someone or something had violently shoved it. The impact was loud enough to shake the room, and for a few seconds, I just stood there, paralyzed. I didn't even have the breath to scream. I just stood there, staring at the shattered remnants of the altar scattered across the floor. The glass from one of the votive candles had splintered so violently that shards reached all the way to the entrance of the pub. A framed picture of St. Anthony had fallen face down, the frame cracked. The small statue of St. Jude was on its side. I was shaking, convinced that someone, or something, had shoved it with deliberate force. My first instinct was to call my sister, who arrived within minutes. When she stepped in and saw the mess, her face went pale. "Did someone break in? Are you okay?" she asked, scanning the place. I mumbled something about it throwing the altar. Words came out jumbled because I was still in shock. She too bent down to pick up the pieces and realized there was no way this had merely toppled over. Everything was too spread out, like it had been hurled. While we were cleaning up, my boss showed up, worried sick that I'd been robbed or hurt. My sister tried to explain what little she understood, but it was obvious he thought something paranormal had happened. He'd always been a rational but open-minded person, especially since that strange marble dropping sound had already been reported by both me and my sister. As we carefully collected what was left of the altar, we made a startling discovery. The St. Jude statue was intact, no cracks anywhere on its body, but the head was missing, as if it had been cleanly sliced off. We searched everywhere, behind the bar, on the floor, even outside near the sidewalk. Nothing. It was just gone. My boss, who'd grown up hearing about omens and folklore, quietly said, "When a saint statue loses its head for no apparent reason, it's never a good sign. Something malevolent might be at work here." That single comment sent chills through me. An uneasy feeling settled in my gut. It was as if the spirit, or whatever it was, had decided to make a statement, and it wasn't a friendly one. With the cleaning done, my sister had to leave for work, but my boss insisted on staying with me until closing. The rest of the evening felt like a countdown, each minute dragging while I feared another sudden outburst of paranormal activity. By the time I got home that night, I was so on edge that I couldn't sleep. I had nightmares about the jawless woman, about violent shadows swirling around me. Even my dog Rocky couldn't calm me down. He seemed uneasy himself, whining at every creak in the apartment. Over the next few days, the bar felt strangely quiet. No more marble sounds, no more flying objects, at least for a little while. But I was still restless, my mind replaying every eerie event. My boss, who felt partially responsible for my well-being, kept an eye on me. One afternoon, we walked into the pub together, hoping a daytime entrance would make us feel safer. Everything seemed normal until we noticed something new. A name carved in small jagged letters along the outer edge of the bar counter. It looked like it had been etched with a tiny blade or needle. I won't repeat the name here. Even seeing it makes my stomach churn. Neither my boss nor I recognized it as any of our regulars, and he was meticulous about checking the bar after each night to prevent vandalism. We both felt certain that this was tied to the restless spirit that had latched onto me. It was a name, and it felt like a warning or a twisted signature. That same day, as I stood there with my boss, I felt an overpowering sense of dread. He told me he knew a local curandera, a spiritual healer, just outside of Salem, in the rural outskirts near Silverton. He admitted he'd been hoping we wouldn't have to involve her, but now it seemed like the only option. He called her on the spot. When she heard my story, she insisted I come see her immediately. She said it was urgent, that the spirit was escalating its attempts to attach itself to me. My boss drove me there early the next morning. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, but a part of me was also terrified to fall asleep. Her small home smelled of incense, and every surface was draped with images of saints, angels, and protective talismans. She led me into a dimly lit room and asked me only for my name and birth date. Then, as if reading from an invisible script, she laid out all the details of my ordeal, things I'd never mentioned on the phone. She explained that I had a sensitive aura, one that naturally drew lost or restless spirits. She believed I had encountered a female presence back in early October, near my apartment's block. This spirit recognized a likeness in me, same height, similar hair color and length, and decided to follow me. She died violently, the curandera said in a voice that made my skin prickle. She has no lower jaw, right? At that, my heart pounded. I confirmed that was exactly what I'd seen in my kitchen. She wants your body, The curandera went on. Not just to scare you, but to inhabit you. That's why you've been losing sleep, feeling drained. She's siphoning your energy. She will keep attacking little by little until you're too weak to resist. I felt tears sting my eyes. It was horrifying, but a tiny part of me was relieved to have an explanation that aligned with everything I'd been experiencing. I was not imagining this. The curandera performed a limpia, a spiritual cleansing, passing various herbs, oils, and incense around me. She prayed and chanted in Spanish and English, asking for protection from benevolent forces. When she finished, I felt something lift from my shoulders, like a pressure I hadn't realized was crushing me. Still, she warned that the spirit would keep trying unless I took additional precautions. Someone close to you must give you a protective quartz, she advised. Choose a color that resonates with you, blue if you want, but it must come from a loved one's hand as a genuine gift of care. Then never let anyone else touch that quartz. It's your spiritual shield. My boss, who had been waiting in another room, helped me to the car afterward. I was emotionally drained, but oddly lighter. I slept more soundly that night than I had in weeks. Later that week, my sister bought me a beautiful blue quartz necklace. She said she walked into a local crystal shop in downtown Salem, thought of me, and that was the first stone she saw. From the moment I put it on, my nightmares lessened. I didn't hear marbles rolling. I didn't see the jawless woman in the hallway or feel icy cold spots in the kitchen at night. But small signs of her presence lingered. Sometimes Rocky would perk his ears up and stare at an empty corner, growling quietly. Occasionally, my quartz would darken in color, turning almost brownish, especially if I felt anxious or if I was alone in the bar cleaning up. Each time it happened, I recalled the curandera's warning. She may not give up easily. A few more weeks went by without any major incidents, and for the first time since October, I felt calm. The bar seemed back to normal. The usual regulars chatting about the Trailblazers or the weather, the jukebox playing old country tunes, and no more unexpected crashes from the altar shelf. Eventually, I decided to move to a different apartment in Kaiser, just a short drive north of Salem. My new place felt more peaceful. Maybe it was the distance from the original area, or maybe it was the lingering protection from the cleansing. As for my job, I continued working at the pub a bit longer to help my boss train a new bartender. Then I resigned to focus on my pregnancy and get some real rest for the first time in months. It's been years since I've encountered that spirit. Thankfully, I still live near Salem, but in a cozier neighborhood surrounded by friendly neighbors and bright streetlights. My dog Rocky is still my loyal companion, and he's calmer now. To this day, I keep my blue quartz with me at all times. It's become more than just a charm. It's a reminder of the unimaginable experiences I've had and how close I came to losing myself to a presence that wanted so much more than just a scare. I don't think I'll ever truly forget the sight of that jawless woman in my kitchen or the helpless terror I felt when the altar was thrown across the room. People still ask me if I believe in ghosts, and I always hesitate. The word ghost doesn't quite capture it. It was something else, something lost, enraged, and determined to find a vessel. And for a while, that vessel was meant to be me. Take my story as you will. If nothing else, let it be a warning that there are energies out there, spirits, entities, forces, that can latch onto us when we least expect it. If you find yourself facing one, remember that sometimes you need more than logic or courage. Sometimes you need a little help from someone who understands the spiritual realm better than most. And if you ever sense you're not alone, especially in the quiet dark of Salem streets, remember my story. Because in a world filled with the ordinary, there's no telling what might be waiting in the shadows, looking for the perfect person to inhabit next. So, what do you think? Could you handle confronting something that wanted to take over your body? What if it latched onto you as you walked home late one night? These are questions I still wrestle with. For now, at least, I can say I survived, and I carry my blue quartz close to my heart, just in case. Thanks so much for sticking around till the end of this story. I really appreciate you listening. I hope you found it as gripping as I did. If you have a story of your own, maybe something spooky, suspenseful, or just plain fun, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to shoot me an email. The address is down in the description. Who knows, your story might be the next one I share here. In the meantime, stay tuned because I've got plenty more tales coming your way. Take care and see you soon.